Has Canon finally totally lost their minds? They are planning on releasing, according to Canon rumors, 3 new cameras this NAB in October. A 500S, a C300S, and a C700S. 5 and the 300 will both be 8K cameras. The 700 will be 4K, up to 240p and 20 plus stops of dynamic range. Is this in any way possible? How are they doing it? Let's find out. So some time ago, Canon released the C300 Mark III. This has a dual gain output sensor. Basically, Canon uses stacked sensors now. It uses 2 sensors or sensors with 2 photo sites for their autofocus. And it's the contrast or the difference between these 2 sites that are very close together that allows the camera to focus. Canon engineers were able to use these double sensors, these sensors stacked on top of one another, to get more dynamic range by basically setting the bottom one to a low ISO and the top one to a high ISO or high sensitivity, and then capturing 2 images simultaneously and then averaging them out, or using the high from the low one and the low from the high one, so that nothing blew out or clipped and you ended up getting 13, 14 stops of dynamic range. People wanted to know immediately, will this be coming as a firmware update to the C500 Mark II? Because that was the C300 Mark III's big brother. Canon basically said, the hardware isn't there, it doesn't quite have the capabilities yet and the processing power, because there's a lot of processing that needs to happen in real time to get that dual gain output. So clearly they've solved that. And not only is the C500 going from 6K to 8K, but it's now going to have a dual gain output sensor, and along with the bigger sensor, because it's a full frame sensor, not a Super 35 sensor, you're going to get 17 stops of dynamic range up from the existing 15. There's also going to be a C300S, which is going to be 8K. Not that excited about that. I personally don't shoot much in 8K. 8K is more for sports, but with the Tokyo Olympics coming up, this is obviously what Canon has been working on, given that they're a major sponsor. And if you want to broadcast or you want to master in 6K, you need something larger than that, so you have the freedom to reframe or stabilize the shot. Dual gain output, or that technology, isn't new. Both Red and ARRI have a version of it. ARRI Alexa, since the very first one, has been using a pretty chunky computer in the camera to do that very rapid dual capture between 2 frames and average them out and get the most dynamic range. That's why, and the nicest roll off. That's why Alexa has become the industry standard in motion pictures. Red does it a different way with HDR-X, where it alternates. It basically turns the ISO up and down very, very quickly between frames. This gives you a huge amount of raw footage, and you're able to mix those yourself in post on your own computer. But it does give bad motion or roll and shutter, because if the thing is moving too quickly, either the camera or the object you're filming, you end up getting movement between the camera shifting from high to low ISO. This doesn't look like it's going to be a problem at all with Canon's DGO technology, since the C700S is going to go all the way up to 240 frames, full frame 4K, we imagine. One interesting thing I noticed about the stats was that the C500 stacked processor has a 4.65 micrometer measurement, whereas the C700 has a 9.6 micrometer measurement. That makes me think that they're using 3 sensors, not just 2 in the C700S. What are you even going to do with 20 frames of dynamic range? Well, there's a difference between the stops that the camera can capture and the stops that are actually usable. Right now, say on the C70, they say it's 13 stops of dynamic range, but you can usually use, without losing your color fidelity or losing your saturation or having too much grain or getting dangerous to clipping, you can usually use the middle 7 or 8. When you're shooting Rec 709 that only has 7 stops of dynamic range, you can only use the middle 2 or 3, which makes it much harder to shoot in. And not over or underexposed. So if you have 20, maybe the middle 12 will be usable. It will mean that you'll be able to reclaim much more in post. You basically just be able to expose your subject at somewhere near stop, meaning take a light meter and say it's 2.8, put it at 2.8, and then not worry about anything, knowing that you can reclaim it in post, no matter how dark or how bright it is. This is sort of how 32-bit floating point audio works, where you don't really need to worry about the level of the audio because you're getting so much anyway. Who are these cameras for? Well, clearly, Canon is making a charge into the ARRI Alexa and Red territory again. And basically, I think their philosophy is just to put out, to keep pushing the envelope and put out as many cameras in their range as possible so that competitors need to either match them or cede that territory to them. And in a way, it's working. Smaller companies like Red can't keep up with Canon's massive R&D and marketing spend. And I feel like Canon is, really trying to get as many cameras out there and is taking up all the oxygen. Why I think this is important for independent filmmakers such as myself is that technologies that start in the C700 and C500 range eventually trickle down to, in the $15,000, $25,000 cameras, tend to trickle down within a year or two into the $5,000 independent filmmaking cameras. So I wouldn't be surprised if this time next year or in 2023, we see a C70 Mark II or Mark III or C70S announced with a 20+ stop dynamic range, with a full frame, with 240p slow and fast mode. If you have a Canon camera or interested in getting one, please check out Canon Masterclass. I have courses on most of the cameras we've talked about today, with the exception of the ones that aren't released yet. My R5 class is about to be launched, as well as the C70 course, which has become really popular, C500 Mark II, C300 Mark III, C200, and also some color grading stuff. Check it out at canonmasterclass.com. That is our look at all the amazing rumors coming out about Canon's, fall lineup, NAB New York 2021 in October. No doubt they'll be announced before that or during that, and then we'll see the cameras in the new year of 2022. Thanks very much for watching. I will see you next time.